Joining me now, Matthew Tuttle, CEO of Tuttle Capital Management. Matthew, happy Friday. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get into your market view and stock picks, I first want to ask you about this Warner Brothers Discovery Netflix deal. Will it happen?
So the stock was initially trading like it wasn't going to happen. It's come back a lot. You know, my sense is it will. I mean, I know deals like this have been struck down in a previous administration. We've got a whole new set of regulators. I don't think they would have tried to do this if they didn't have a really good sense it was going to happen. So, you know, I'd be a buyer of the Netflix dip here, and I do think this deal is going to end up happening.
Okay, so in terms of stock reaction, we see Netflix lower only by about 1% right now, but to your point, about 5% lower this month. We have WBD higher, and then Paramount Skydance taking the biggest hit. So as you think about these as stock opportunities, Netflix is most attractive?
I would say Netflix is most attractive. You know, we've got a lot left to go on this whole streaming thing. You know, I don't know about you, but I've got like 7 different streaming services. That doesn't make sense. You know, we've got a lot to figure out here, but I think Netflix is really well positioned to come out of this as the clear winner. So that's the name that I would be in, and I wouldn't be in any of the others.
Okay. Any of the others overall, even a Disney, for example?
I wouldn't be in Disney. I haven't liked that stock, and I don't remember the last time I liked that stock. You know, Apple might be the only one because, I mean, Apple TV is not that big a deal. You're not buying Apple for Apple TV. You're buying them for all the other things. But beyond that, Netflix would be the only name.
Okay. All right, let's talk about your market view because stocks have seasonality on their side. We've seen actually some pretty modest but gains for the first week of December. It's been a great year. Are you expecting a Santa Claus rally this year, Matthew?
So it depends on what Powell says next week. I am expecting a Santa Claus rally. I mean, I think the headwinds or the tailwinds are behind the market here. You know, every dip gets bought. Every time everyone is freaking out about something, you know, it ends up being a dip buying opportunity. But Powell does have the potential to play Grinch here if either A, he doesn't cut, or B, he says the economy's in awful shape, which is why we're forced to cut. I don't think either of those things are going to happen. So I am bullish into year end.
And then what about as you think about 2026? Are you as bullish?
I am cautiously bullish. There are some headwinds. There's the whole open AI and, you know, all of the creative financing. There's what's going on in private credit, what's going on in Japan. What is the Fed's dot plot? If they cut here, do they keep cutting? So there's a lot of things that, you know, you should be a little concerned about. You know, what we teach investors is always have hedges. And if you've always got hedges, you can sleep well at night. You don't have to worry about it.
Okay, so let's talk about what's on your shopping list as we, you know, continue with the final trading month of the year as you think about 2026, and then also how are you hedging?
So on my shopping list, what we look for are what are going to be the most disruptive themes over the next 12 to 36 months. And then within those themes, what are the top names? So, you know, AI, obviously, I think that's gotten interesting from the standpoint that a couple of months ago, I would have told you NVIDIA is the obvious winner in AI. Now I would say they are one of the obvious winners in AI. You've got Google in there. You've got Broadcom in there. You might even have AMD in there. So looking at that, I love the meta news this morning that they're getting out of this whole, or, you know, not spending so much time on this whole metaverse thing and pivoting more towards AI. One area we really like that I think is below the radar screen is space. You know, there are a whole bunch of things that are made down here that are better off in space. You're going to have a whole infrastructure. It's a ways away, and there are not a lot of companies like Rocket Lab and Lunar. So those are some things we like. Biotech is an area we like, especially related to AI. So a name like Tempest AI would be another one.
So basically, tech, which of course has outperformed this year, will continue driving the market higher in 2026. Are there other areas of the market, though, that we could see participation in that you'd also be interested in?
Yeah, I mean, anything drone related we like. I think drones are the future of warfare. So a lot of these smaller defense companies like a Kratos or something like that, we like that. Um, we like anything kind of energy related. It's an AI trade, but AI is going to need so much power. So it's nuclear, it's solar, it's natural gas, it's coal, those things. I also think you ought to own gold and silver, and you also ought to own crypto. I would be very careful of having a lot of my money tied up in fiat currency and a lot of my money tied up in bonds. In fact, I hate bonds, but I much prefer having gold, silver, and the big cryptos, Bitcoin and Ether.
Are those the best hedges, or are you hedging with anything else either? Because those
No, I mean those
not
aren't
gold
really
and silver,
great
but
hedges. Yeah, I mean sometimes like the crypto bros will come out and be like, "Oh, crypto's a hedge." Crypto's not a hedge. Sometimes gold is a hedge, but for me, a hedge is something it works every time, and those things don't. I love buying puts on ARK. Think that's a great fund, and when the market goes down, that goes down a lot. We're probably going to add some puts on the Nasdaq just in case this AI thing unravels. Sometimes we'll buy calls on VIX. Those are kind of the tried and true hedges that we like to use.
okay. So your best advice for investors as we head into next week with Fed Chair Powell. Obviously, it sounds like you think the market could be a little bit vulnerable to what he says, although you seem pretty bullish. So best advice for investors heading into year end and as they think about 2026.
Again, going back to what I said, look at what are the most disruptive themes going to be going forward. Pick the winners in those themes. I would stay away from anything related to the consumer. I think we've got a two-tier economy where the rich are doing better and the poor are doing worse. So, I wouldn't touch anything that has any relation to the consumer. I wouldn't touch anything that has any relation to private credit. There are cracks in that area that, may or may not break. But I'd focus on, where are the top themes going forward and just being those winners.
And just finally, are there any other themes outside of AI, space, and drones to your point earlier?
So again, biotech, but then within biotech, the other one is the weight loss drugs. I love Eli Lilly. Everybody I talk to now is on Zepbound or Ozempic or something. So that's a trend that I think you also want to be in.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Matthew Tuttle, CEO, Tuttle Capital Management. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.